They say a man explodes if he eats 2 devil fruits. It is the one absolute unbreakable law of the Grand Line. To seek that kind of power is to sign your own death warrant. But what if the man destined to turn the world upside down didn't just break the rules, but burn them to ash? What if the rubber man became the fireman, carrying the will of his brother, not just in his heart, but in his very blood? The war at Marineford was terrible, with sounds of screams and cannon fire. But for Monkey D. Luffy, the world had gone silent. Ace was gone. The hole in his chest was a void that threatened to swallow Luffy whole. As Akainu withdrew his magma fist, mocking the weakness of the pirate bloodline, a strange phenomenon occurred amidst the rubble. A single fruit, rolling out of a shattered supply crate from a fallen marine ship, began to swirl. Its skin morphed, turning a deep, vibrant orange with flame patterns. The Mera Mera no Mi had been reborn instantly, drawn to the intense will of its former owner. Blackbeard, arriving on the scene with his crew, spotted it immediately. His eyes widened with greed. He didn't just want Whitebeard's power. He wanted the fire fruit to complete a triad of destruction. He lunged for it, his darkness spreading across the ground. Luffy, his mind shattered, operating on pure animalistic instinct and grief, saw the man who captured Ace reaching for the last physical remnant of him. Luffy didn't think. He didn't calculate the consequences. He simply moved. His rubber body snapped forward, snatching the fruit inches from Teach's grasp. With tears blinding his eyes and a guttural scream that tore his throat, Luffy shoved the fruit into his mouth and swallowed. Time seemed to stop. The battlefield froze. Marco the Phoenix watched in horror. Garp's eyes widened. Even Akainu paused, waiting for the inevitable detonation. A body cannot handle 2 devils. It destroys the soul. Luffy fell to his knees, clutching his chest. His veins bulged, turning black, then red. Steam erupted from his pores, his skin stretching and bubbling. He screamed, a sound of pure agony, as the rubber of his body fought against the intangible fire trying to consume it. But he didn't explode. Instead of death, a terrifying synergy was born. The rubber, adaptable and stretching, expanded to accommodate the volatile energy. Flames didn't burn him, they fused with him. For a brief second, Luffy looked up at Akainu, his eyes glowing like molten gold. He threw a punch. It wasn't just a gum-gum pistol. It was a lance of condensed fire and rubber that slammed into Akainu's magma with enough force to push the Admiral back. The heat was different. It wasn't just hot, it was angry. Luffy collapsed immediately after, his body shutting down from the shock. Trafalgar Law submarines surfaced just in time. As they dragged Luffy's unconscious, steaming body on board, the surgeons had to wear heat-resistant gloves. His body temperature was fluctuating wildly. He had survived the impossible, but the question remained. Was he still Luffy, or had he become something else entirely? But on the deserted island of Rusukina, a nightmare was being forged. Silver's Rayleigh sat by a campfire watching his students. Training Luffy was usually about teaching control, but this was different. This was about containment. Luffy wasn't just mastering haki, he was learning to keep his own body from melting. The gum-gum fruit gave him durability, but the flame fruit wanted to be wild. Early in the training, Luffy tried to use Gear Second. The result was catastrophic. The increased blood flow pumped the fire through his system too fast, turning him into a living bomb. He scorched an entire section of the jungle, nearly killing himself in the process. Rayleigh had to teach him to compartmentalize. He had to learn to treat the fire not as a separate power, but as an extension of his rubber. Luffy sat in meditation, animals keeping their distance. He focused on the sensation of Ace. He didn't want to suppress the fire. He wanted to hold Ace's hand. He visualized the rubber hardening, not just with haki, but vulcanizing. Rubber, when treated with heat and sulfur, becomes harder, stronger, more durable. Luffy realized he didn't need to just shoot fire. He could become the fire. By the end of the 2 years, the boy who left Marineford was gone. The man who stood on the beach, looking toward the Sabaody archipelago, was radiating a constant low-level heat. He wore his chest scar like a badge of honor, the tissue around it slightly glowing when he got excited. He picked up his hat, the Viva card of Rayleigh burning safely in his pocket, not because of the paper, but because his very presence felt like a hearth. The return to Sabaody was chaos. The fake straw hats were terrorizing the populace, unaware that the real monster had arrived. When Luffy encountered the imposters, he didn't even need to attack. As the fake Luffy pointed a gun at him, the real Luffy simply glared. A wave of Conqueror's haki rolled out, but it was laced with a physical heat wave. The gun in the imposter's hand grew red hot, warping and melting the barrel until it drooped like wet clay. The imposter screamed, dropping the weapon. Then the pacifista arrived. The cyborgs that had once driven the crew to desperation were now just a benchmark for his growth. The laser charged, a beam of light aimed at Luffy's head. In the past, he would have dodged. Now, he stood his ground. He vanished. He didn't just move fast. He moved like a flickering flame. He reappeared instantly in front of the pacifista. Gum Gum. Jet flare pistol. His fist didn't just hit the metal, it sank into it. The impact was a localized explosion. The rubber fist, superheated to thousands of degrees, punched through the pacifista's chest armor like it was butter. Flames erupted from the cyborg's back, cauterizing the exit wound instantly. The machine didn't even have time to malfunction. It simply melted into a heap of slag. Zoro and Sanji, arriving on the scene, stopped in their tracks. They felt the heat from 50 yards away. Sanji lit a cigarette, staring at his captain. He didn't need his lighter. The ambient air was hot enough. Luffy turned to them, a grin stretching across his face, flames licking the corners of his mouth before fading away. He had done it. He had turned the grief of Marineford into the fuel for the new era. Descending into the crushing depths of the ocean toward Fishman Island, the laws of nature tried to strangle the Straw Hat, but Luffy was no longer just a rubber man subject to the sea's cold grip. When the Kraken attacked, dragging the ship into the abyss, Luffy didn't just inflate a giant limb. He activated his power, and for the first time, the ocean hissed. The Red Hawk wasn't a technique born of friction anymore. It was a biological reality. His arm turned into a glowing lance of magma-hot rubber, instantly boiling the seawater around it. The steam explosion created a cavitation bubble, protecting his flame from being snuffed out by the ocean. When he punched the beast, the impact didn't just bruise, it cooked. The Kraken recoiled not from the force, but from the sudden, searing agony of being boiled alive in its own element. Upon reaching the plaza where Horty Jones and his army of 50,000 waited, the difference in Luffy's power was terrifyingly clear. Conqueror's haki rippled out, but it carried a wave of heat that distorted the air. Weak-willed fishmen didn't just foam at the mouth and collapse. They fell back, gasping for moisture as the air suddenly turned arid and dry. When Horty, pumped full of energy steroids, tried to bite Luffy's shoulder, his shark teeth didn't find pliable rubber. They sank into vulcanized, superheated skin. Horty screamed, his jaw sizzling as if he had bitten into an active volcano. Luffy didn't need to dodge the water bullets. He evaporated them before they touched his skin. The final clash wasn't a struggle, it was an extermination. The elephant Gatling didn't just rain down fists, it rained down meteors, turning the Noah from a falling ship into a descending comet that Luffy shattered with burning passion. Rising from the depths to the new world, the hazard of Punk Hazard became a playground for the fire rubber human. The island was split between freezing ice and burning magma. On the ice side, the cold that bit at his crewmates meant nothing to him. He walked shirtless through the blizzard, his body radiating a constant warmth that kept Law and Smoker from freezing during their alliance talks. He was a walking hearth. When Caesar Clown unleashed his poisonous gas and explosive slimes, he thought he had the upper hand against a brawler. He was wrong. Gas is flammable. When Caesar tried to suffocate Luffy with his gastanet, removing the oxygen, Luffy didn't panic. He ignited his own body, using the remaining oxygen in his expanded lungs to create a backdraft. He grabbed Caesar, his fingers melting through the gas form not with haki alone, but by burning the gas itself. Caesar's panic was genuine. He wasn't facing a user he could choke out. He was facing a spark in a room full of dynamite. And Monet? The snow woman stood no chance. Her cold embrace, usually deadly, turned into water the moment she tried to grapple him. Luffy didn't even have to punch her. He simply flared his aura, and the snowstorm around him wept into puddles. But the true test of this devilish synergy arrived in the Kingdom of Passion, Dressrosa. Since the world knew Luffy had consumed the Flame fruit at Marineford, Doflamingo couldn't use Ace's fruit as bait. There was no tournament for the Mera Mera no Mi. The trap was different, but the anger was the same. The reunion with Sabo was quieter, heavier. Without the fruit to fight over, Sabo found Luffy in the sunflower fields. He didn't come to claim Ace's power. He came to see the brother who carried it. Seeing Luffy produce a small flame from his thumb, lighter style, brought tears to the revolutionary's eyes. It wasn't theft, it was a living memorial. "It suits you," Sabo said, and that validation unlocked something in Luffy that training never could. The fight with Doflamingo shifted from a battle of endurance to a battle of meltdown. Doflamingo's awakened strings were versatile, sharp, and nearly unbreakable. But rubber that is heated to extreme temperatures doesn't just stretch. It becomes sticky, viscous, and heavy. When Doflamingo tried to cut Luffy with his overheat whip, Luffy didn't block. He caught the string. His hockey-coated hand combined with the intense heat of the Mera Mera no Mi made the string lose its tension, sagging and melting under the thermal stress. Then came the Gear 4th transformation. Boundman was terrifying enough in the original timeline, but this version was a monstrosity of steam and fire. As Luffy blew air into his muscles, the fire inside him mixed with the oxygen, turning his body into a high-pressure combustion engine. The tribal markings on his chest didn't just darken with haki, they glowed like molten veins. The steam scarf floating around him wasn't white vapor, it was a wreath of pure fire. Gear 4th, Vulcan Man. When he flew, he didn't bounce off the air. He used jet propulsion, blasts of fire shooting from his feet like rockets. His speed broke the sound barrier instantly. The Kong gun became the Meteor gun. When his fist retracted into his arm, the compression ignited the air inside. The punch released with the force of a cannonball, trailing a tail of fire. Doflamingo's God Thread, his ultimate defense, was designed to pierce, not to withstand heat. Luffy's fist burned through the holy white strings, turning them to ash before slamming into the Warlord. Doflamingo wasn't just knocked into the ground, he was cratered into it, the rock around him turning to glass from the impact temperature. The birdcage didn't fall because Doflamingo was unconscious. It fell because the strings holding it together lost their structural integrity against the rising heat of the rubber sun fighting in the center of the city. Luffy didn't just liberate Dressrosa, he purged it with fire. Then came the Emperor's territory, Whole Cake Island. In the original history, Cracker's biscuit soldiers were an impenetrable wall that required water to soften. But fire is a cruel mistress to dry food. When Cracker summoned his endless army, Luffy didn't need Nami to make it rain. He simply exhaled. A wave of heat, rippling like a mirage, rolled over the seducing woods. The biscuits didn't soften, they blackened. They became brittle, cracking and crumbling into charcoal dust under the slightest touch. Cracker found his greatest defense turned into fuel for the invader's furnace. And Katakuri, the man made of mochi, the perfect mirror to rubber, he found his natural predator. Mochi is formidable because it is sticky and dense, but apply enough heat and it loses all structure. It becomes a bubbling, viscous soup. Every time Katakuri tried to harden his mochi with block mochi, Luffy's hot Gatling kept the temperature so high that the mochi couldn't set. The mirror world became a sauna. Katakuri's awakening, turning the floor into mochi, backfired instantly as Luffy turned the ground into a bubbling trap of superheated syrup. The unconquerable man fell not because he was weaker, but because he melted. But destiny waited in the land of the samurai. Wano was where the legend would be cemented. Kaido, the strongest creature, the dragon who breathed fire, looked down on the rubber boy. In their first clash, the blast breath that usually leveled mountains washed over Luffy. He stood amidst the scorched earth, unharmed, his skin glowing a defiant orange. Is that the best you've got, Kaido? The raid on Onigashima wasn't a battle, it was an ascension. When Luffy reached the roof, the red rock he unleashed wasn't just a metaphor for Ace, it was Ace. The punch that floored the Dragon Emperor carried the phantom weight of a second fist beside it. But the true miracle happened when Luffy's heart stopped, and the drums of liberation began to beat. The awakening of the Nika fruit is a transformation of freedom. But what happens when the Sun God, the warrior of liberation, also holds the power of the sun itself? Luffy rose from the dead, his hair turning white and flowing like clouds, his clothes bleached by the sheer power of his form. But unlike the Nika we knew, this one was wreathed in a corona of white fire. He didn't just turn the ground to rubber, he turned the very air into plasma. He grabbed lightning bolts from the sky and didn't just throw them, he ignited them. Kaido watched in terror as the giant Luffy loomed over Onigashima. The Bajrang gun descended. In another life, it was a fist the size of an island. In this life, it was a falling star. The friction of the massive rubber fist entering the atmosphere, combined with the awakened fire fruit, created a miniature sun. It was blindingly bright, a beacon of hope for the people of Wano, and a sentence of death for the tyrant. When the fist connected, it didn't just punch Kaido into the magma underground. It felt like the sun itself had come down to reclaim its domain. The heat evaporated the clouds, the rain, and the despair. Kaido didn't just lose. He was incinerated by the combined will of Joy Boy and the Fire Fist.